Miss Melissa with the Oosterhout Free Library, and I have a great American tall tale for you today by Mary Pope Osborne. It's about Pecos Bill and Slewfoot Sue, fictional cowboys that really sums up everything we've always loved in our tall tales about the West. Ask any coyote near the Pecos River in western Texas who the best cowboy was who ever lived. He'll throw back his head and howl, "Oh!" If you don't already know, that's coyote language for Pecos Bill. When Pecos Bill was a little baby, he was as tough as a pine knot. He teethed on horseshoes instead of teething rings and played with grizzly bears instead of teddy bears. He could have grown up just fine in the untamed land of eastern Texas. But one day his pappy came running in from the fields, hollering, "Pack up, Ma! Neighbors moving in 50 miles away. It's getting too crowded." Before sundown, Bill's folks loaded their 15 kids and all their belongings into their covered wagon and started west. As they clattered across the desolate land of western Texas, the crushing heat nearly drove them all crazy. Baby Bill got so hot and cross that he began to wallop his big brothers. Pretty soon all 15 kids were going at it tooth and nail. Before they turned each other into catfish bait, Bill fell out of the wagon and landed kerplop in the sun-scorched desert. The others were so busy fighting that they didn't even notice the baby was missing until it was too late to do anything about it. Well, tough little Bill just sat there in the dirt, watching his family rattle off in a cloud of dust, till an old coyote walked over and sniffed him. "Goo-goo," Bill said. Now, it's an amazing coincidence, but goo-goo happens to mean something similar to glad to meet you in coyote language. Naturally, the old coyote figured he'd come across one of his own kind. He gave Bill a big lick and picked him up by the scruff of the neck and carried him home in his den. Bill soon discovered that coyotes' kinfolks were about the wildest, roughest bunch you can imagine. Before he knew it, he was roaming the prairies with the pack. He howled at the moon, sniffed the brush, and chased lizards across the sand. He was having such a good time, scuttling about naked and dirty on all fours, that he completely forgot what it was like to be a human. Pecos Bill's coyote days came to an end about 17 years later. One evening, when he was sniffing the sagebrush, a cowpoke came loping along on a big horse. "Hey, you! What on earth are you?" he shouted. Bill sat on his haunches and stared at the fellow. "Varmint," said Bill hoarsely, for he hadn't used his human voice in 17 years. "No, you ain't." "Yeah, I am. Got fleas, don't I?" "Well, that don't mean nothing," said the cowboy. "Lots of Texans have fleas. The thing varmints got that you don't is a tail." "Oh, yeah, I have a tail," said Pecos Bill. "Let me see it," said the cowpoke. Bill turned around to look at his rear end, and for the first time in his life he realized he didn't have a tail. "Dang, if I'm not a varmint, what am I?" "You're a cowboy," said the cowboy, "so start acting like one." Bill just growled at the fellow like any coyote worth his salt would. But deep down in his heart of hearts, he knew the cowpoke was right. For the last 17 years, he'd had a sneaking suspicion that he was different from that pack of coyotes. For one thing, none of them seemed to smell quite as bad as he did. So with a heavy heart, he said goodbye to his four-legged friends and took off with the cowpoke for the nearest ranch. Acting like a human wasn't all that easy for Pecos Bill. Even though he soon started dressing right, he never bothered to shave or comb his hair. In the morning, he'd just throw some water on his face and go around the rest of the day looking like a wet dog. Ignorant cowpokes claimed Bill wasn't too smart. Some of the meaner ones liked to joke he wore a $10 hat on a 5-cent head. The truth was, Pecos Bill would soon prove to be one of the greatest cowboys who ever lived. He just needed to find the kind of folks who'd appreciate him. One night, when he was licking his dinner plate, his ears perked up. A couple of ranch hands were going on about a gang of wild cowboys. "Yep, those fellers are more animal than human," one ranch hand was saying. "Yep," said another, "them's the toughest bunch I ever come across. Heck, they're so tough they can kick fire out of the flint rock with their bare toes. Yep, and they like to bite nails in half for fun. Who are these fellows? Said Bill. The Hell's Gate gang, said the ranch hand. The mangiest, meanest, most low-down bunch of low-life varmints that ever grew hair. Sounds like my kind of folks, said Bill, and before anyone could holler whoa, he jumped on his horse and took off for Hell's Gate Canyon. Bill hadn't gone far when disaster struck. His horse stepped into a hole and broke its ankle. Dang, said Bill as he stumbled up from the spill. He draped the lame critter around his neck and hurried on. After he'd walked about 100 more miles, Bill heard some mean rattling. When a 50-foot rattlesnake reared up its ugly head and stuck out its long, forked tongue, it was ready to fight. Knock it off, you scaly-hided fool. I'm in a hurry, Bill said. The snake didn't give a spit for Bill's plans. He just rattled on. Before the cussed varmint could strike, Bill had no choice but knock him cross-eyed. Hey, feller, he said, holding up the dazed snake. I like your spunk. Come along with us. Then he wrapped the rattler around his arm and continued on his way. After Bill had hiked another 100 miles with his horse around his neck and his snake around his arm, he heard a terrible growl. A huge mountain lion was crouching on a cliff, getting ready to jump on top of him. Don't jump, you mangy bobtailed fleabag, Bill said. Well, call any mountain lion a mangy bobtailed fleabag and he'll jump on your back for sure. After this one leapt onto Bill, so much fur began to fly it darkened the sky. Bill wrestled that mountain lion into a headlock, then squeezed him so tight the big cat had tried to call uncle. When the embarrassed old critter started to slink off, Bill felt sorry for him. Ah, come on, you big silly, he said. You're more like me than most humans I meet. He saddled up the cat, jumped on his back, and the four of them headed for the canyon, with the mountain lion screeching, the horse neighing, the rattler rattling, and Pecos Bill hollering a wild war whoop. When the Hell's Gate gang heard these noises coming from the prairie, they nearly fainted. They dropped to their dinner plates, and their faces turned as white as the bleached desert bones. Their knees knocked, and their 6 guns shook. Hey there, Bill said as he sidled up to their campfire, grinning. Who's the boss around here? A 9-foot feller with 10 pistols at his side stepped forward and with a shaky voice said, Stranger, I was, but from now on it'll be you. Well, thank you, partner, said Bill. Get on with your dinner, boys. Don't let me interrupt. Once Bill settled down with the Hell's Gate gang, his true genius revealed itself. With this gang's help, he put together the biggest ranch in the Southwest. He used New Mexico as a corral and Arizona as a pasture. He invented tarantulas and scorpions as practical jokes. He also invented roping. Some say his rope was exactly as long as the equator. Others argue it was 2 foot shorter. Things were going fine for Bill until Texas began to suffer the worst drought in its history. It was so dry that all the rivers turned as powdery as biscuit flour. The parched grass was catching fire everywhere. For a while, Bill and his gang managed to lasso water from the Rio Grande. When that river dried up, they lassoed water from the Gulf of Mexico. No matter what he did, though, Bill couldn't get enough water to stay ahead of the drought. All his horses and cows were starting to dry up and blow away like balls of tumbleweed. It was horrible. Just when the end seemed near, the sky turned a deep shade of purple. From the distant mountain came a terrible roar. The cattle began to stampede, and a huge black funnel of a cyclone appeared, headed straight for Bill's ranch. The rest of Hell's Gate gang shouted, "Help!" and ran. But Pecos Bill wasn't scared in the least. "Yahoo!" he hollered, and he swung his lariat and lassoed that cyclone around its neck. Bill held on tight as he got sucked up into the middle of the swirling crowd. He grabbed the cyclone by the ears and pulled himself across its back. Then he let out a whoop and headed that twister across Texas. The mighty cyclone bucked, arched, and screamed like a wild bronco. But Pecos Bill just held on with his legs and used his strong hands to wring the rain out of the wind. He wrung out rain that flooded Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona, until finally he slid off the shriveled-up funnel and fell into California. The earth sank about 200 feet below sea level in the spot where Bill landed, creating the valley we know now as Death Valley. "There, that little watering should hold things for a while," he said, brushing himself off. After a cyclone ride, no horse was too wild for Pecos Bill. He soon found a young colt that was as tough as a tiger and as crazy as a streak of lightning. He named the colt Widowmaker and raised him on barbed wire and dynamite. Whenever the two rode together, they backflipped and somersaulted all over Texas, loving every minute of it. One day, when Bill and the Widowmaker were bouncing around the Pecos River, they came across an awesome sight: a wild-looking, red-haired woman riding on the back of the biggest catfish Bill had ever seen. The woman looked like she was having a ball, screeching, "Ride 'em, cowgirl!" as the catfish whipped her around in the air. "What's your name?" Bill shouted. "Slewfoot Sue, what's it to you?" she said. Then she whooped away over the windy water. Before all Pecos Bill could think of was Slewfoot Sue. He spent more and more time away from the Hell's Gate gang as he wandered the barren cattlelands looking for her. When he finally found her lonely little cabin, he was so love-struck he reverted to some of his old coyote ways. He sat on his haunches in the moonlight and began a-howling and a-hooling. Well, the good news was that Sue had a bit of coyote in herself too, so she completely understood Bill's language. She stuck her head out her window and ah-hooed back to him that she loved him too. Consequently, Bill and Sue decided to get married. On the day of the wedding, Sue wore a beautiful white dress with a steel spring bustle. Bill appeared in an elegant buckskin suit. But after a lovely ceremony, a terrible catastrophe occurred. Slewfoot Sue got it into her head that she just had to have a ride on Bill's wild bronco, Widowmaker. "You can't do that, honey," Bill said. "He won't let any human toss a leg over him but me." "Don't worry," said Sue. "You know I can ride anything on 4 legs, not to mention what flies or swims." Bill tried his best to talk Sue out of it, but she wouldn't listen. She was dying to buck on the back of that bronco. Wearing her white wedding dress with the bustle, she jumped on Widowmaker and kicked him with her spurs. Well, that bronco didn't need any thorns on his side to start bucking to beat the band. He bounded up in the air with such amazing force that suddenly Sue was flying high into the Texas sky. She flew so high that she looped over the new moon and fell back to earth. But when Sue landed on her steel spring bustle, she rebounded right back into the heavens. As she bounced back and forth between heaven and earth, Bill whirled his lariat above his head and lassoed her. But instead of bringing Sue back down to earth, he got yanked into the night sky with her. Together, Pecos Bill and Slewfoot Sue bounced off the earth and went flying to the moon. At that point, Bill must have gotten some sort of foothold in a moon crater, because neither he nor Sue returned to earth. Not ever. Folks figure the two of them must have dug their boot heels into some moon cheese and raised a pack of wild coyotes just like themselves. Texans will tell you every time you hear thunder rolling over the desolate land near the Pecos River, it's just Bill's family having a good laugh upstairs. And when you hear a strange ah-hooing in the dark moon, don't be fooled. It's the sound of Wild Bill howling on the moon instead of at it. And when lights flash across the midnight sky, you can bet it's Bill and Sue riding the backs of some white-hot shooting stars. I love that. Isn't that crazy, all that hyperbole? Next time on the Oosterhout Free Library Virtual Summer Reading Program, we'll look at another tall tale.